Thank you, Senator Polly. Senator Andy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. And I rise this evening to speak in support of the Treasury Laws Amendment Recovering Unpaid Superannuation Bill 2019. And I should say, having listened to some of the submissions of those on the other side, that I am once again, well, would it be putting it too high to suggest, flabbergasted by the approach taken by the Australian Labor Party. This is not an opportunity, Madam Deputy President, to play politics. It seems sometimes in this place, if we were on this side of the chamber to put up the colour black, we would simply get back the colour white from the other side of the chamber. And it does make you wonder what is the modus operandi of those who sit opposite. This is not, and we hear it so often, anything to do with this so-called big end of town. I mean, I would often challenge anyone to find me what that big end of town actually is. What this actually represents is the Morrison government creating a new era of superannuation enforcement by legislating the superannuation guarantee amnesty, which was first announced way back in on the 24th of May 2018. It's a piece of legislation which is designed to encourage employers who were not compliant to come forward to ensure employees receive superannuation that they are entitled to. So I'm not going to cast myself as some journeyman in this place, but I am old enough to know that once upon a time the Australian Labor Party would consider itself to be the party of the workers. Once upon a time. That would seem to be not the case anymore, though, Madam Deputy President, and let me assure you it's no longer the case, because I can show you example after example confirming, in fact, that the Morrison government is the friend of working Australians, and that the Morrison government are the people who are on the side of working people in this country, and that the Morrison government has the track record to prove that this is so. And we can show it demonstrably in the last period, because in fact the Australian Tax Office has shown data in the recent days which shows that in fact the government's personal income tax plan has given 8.1 million Australians in the order of $6.1 billion in additional income in the first 6 months since implementation. Income earners in the range of $37,000 to $90,000 in that tax bracket have received around 80% of the additional income from the government's tax cut, and they are receiving on average $967 from the low and middle income tax offset, up to a maximum of $1,080. And these low and middle income tax offsets contributed something in the order of $4.5 billion, or around 60% of the growth in household disposable income in the September quarter, which has been the largest increase in a decade. And had these tax cuts not been paid, income would have grown by about 1%, if not 2.5%. Now, this is just one simple example, but one can well imagine what would have happened in circumstances where the Australian people had elected a Bill Shorten-led government in this country. We would have seen $387 billion stripped from the economy, $387 billion ultimately stripped from the workers. So this government wants employers to bring non-payments and underpayments out into the open to ensure that employees actually get in their hands the superannuation to which they are entitled. This is a piece of legislation which is designed fairly and squarely in the interests of workers. Don't believe what you hear from across the chamber. This is for the working people of this country. And with new powers given by this government to the Australian Tax Office recently, there's no longer anywhere for employers who do the wrong thing to hide, because unscrupulous employers will be caught. And that doesn't sound very much like being this so-called friend of the big end of town. That is a nonsense, that is a furphy, that is a creation of those opposite. However, these measures are, of course, forward-looking. They don't address historical underpayments and non-payments of superannuation. and reuniting as many workers as possible with superannuation, which is rightly theirs, is the priority of this government. And this bill represents a rare opportunity for businesses to come forward, to do the right thing and to clean the slate for their future. And I think it's important at this point to briefly outline a background in relation to the government's position, what's already been legislated and the rationale for this particular segment of legislation. And in the last parliament, a package of legislation was passed to ensure that employers can no longer hide from their obligations. The government did this because of the significant issue with respect to non-compliance. And we now know that in 2015 to 16, that non-compliance amounted to something in the order of $2.8 billion, which went unpaid to employees. Once again, doesn't sound like something which is in the best interests of this fabled big end of town that we hear so much about. This sounds very much to me like something which is framed fairly and squarely for the workers of this country. And in March 2019, this government introduced a suite of reforms designed to improve the integrity of the superannuation guarantee system and, most importantly, to better detect and deter non-compliance by employers, which included measures such as the single-touch payroll regime, bringing payroll reporting into the 21st century and aligning payroll with regular employer reporting of tax and super obligations. More frequent reporting of employer superannuation guarantee obligations is now being complemented by near real-time reporting from superannuation funds on the contributions that they actually receive, enabling the ATO to identify and to take action against non-compliance. So the government has actually strengthened the ATO's collection and enforcement capabilities already, and the ATO now has a broad suite of new powers, which include the ability to be able to send out director penalty notices, security deposits, and also, in some instances, where employers are so able to defy directions, the ATO can now actually apply for punitive court-ordered penalties, including up to 12 months of imprisonment for those who are non-compliant. And once again, Madam Acting Deputy President, this does not seem to me to be something framed in the interests of anyone other than workers. It's a nonsense. The government understands that at all times that there are times when employees are just simply unaware that they've not been paid superannuation, and consequently the ATO can now inform all potentially affected employees of any investigation into their employer's compliance. Previously, the ATO could only communicate with employees who had actually made a complaint to the ATO regarding their unpaid superannuation, leaving other unaffected employees in the dark. Once again, employees, always in the interests of the employees. But of course, this government understands that without proper funding, the ATO cannot do its job, and without resources, it cannot do its job. And this government has provided an additional $133.7 million in the 18-19 budget for the ATO to actually fund this process. Such is the compulsion in order to make this process work and make it viable. And a critical limb to this process, and one which furthers that sentiment that the government is absolutely serious about protecting workers and protecting their hip pocket, is that as a result of that funding, in the 18-19 period, the ATO contacted more than 22,000 employers, and as a result of reviews or audits, recovered something in the order of $805 million in unpaid superannuation. The government's crackdown on non-compliance therefore complements reforms to protect low balance and inactive superannuation accounts from undue erosion and put members' interests first. And the Protecting Your Superannuation Act, which commenced on the 1st of July 2019, did that job and seeks to protect Australians from excessive fees, from unnecessary insurance premiums and inefficiencies from having multiple accounts. And these reforms also, for the first time, provide the Tax Office with the ability to proactively reunite Australians with their low balance or inactive accounts. Together, these reforms to which I speak will result in millions of Australians saving billions of dollars in fees and charges and insurance premiums, and will be able to reduce unnecessary and duplicate accounts. Now, all of this is background, and it's all framed for the purposes of once again showing the other side of this chamber that this suggestion that to oppose this bill will somehow be in the interests of workers is a good thing. That's not a good thing. That's a furphy. That's a nonsense. The current bill, which is before us today, will, if passed, will, from the 24th of May 2018 to 6 months after the date of ascension of this bill, will allow employers to be able to come forward to disclose non-payments or, in fact, underpayments and pay their workers what they're owed. Now, they'll be required to pay a significant sum of interest, so that's punitive enough for the employers, but they will avoid the usual penalties and fees that would apply, and they'll also be entitled to claim a tax deduction for the amount they pay during the period. Importantly, employers will not be able to use the amnesty if they come forward after an ATO prosecution has already begun. So this is really about trying to flush out that which is owed to workers. It's about trying to recover as much as we can for workers and by providing incentives to do so. And the bill ensures that employers who come forward in good faith when the amnesty is announced and are covered, they'll be covered by this amnesty. Now, without playing politics about this issue, Madam Acting Deputy President, the importance of this issue is that since the amnesty was first announced, over 7,000 employers have actually come forward, and those employers cannot receive the full concessional treatment under the amnesty until it's legislated. And Treasury estimates that there are in the order of a further 7,000 employers who will come forward once the amnesty is legislated. It's a nonsense to suggest this amnesty simply lets employers off the hook. That's not the case. And it's a nonsense to suggest that this legislation will somehow leave workers worse off. The amnesty is designed exclusively to benefit employees. Employers will only get the benefit of this amnesty if they pay their employees the full entitlement of that which has been underpaid or that which has not been paid in title in full with the significant interest penalty. It simply provides an opportunity for employers to review their compliance history, to come forward in good faith and pay anything that's owed before the ATO actually begins their investigation. And employers with a significant historical underpayment who voluntarily fail to disclose those underpayments by the ATO after the amnesty period will be subject to penalties. So, once again, this is designed in order to act in the best interests of those in which the scheme was originally designed for. This is a piece of legislation which is designed to act in the interests of employees. And it's important to note, as I've already pointed out, that this is not just in relation to non-payments. This is not just in relation to instances where employers have simply forgotten to pay or deliberately avoided paying superannuation. This is also in relation to the very common, presumably, instance of underpayments of superannuation. Now, Madam Acting Deputy President, when this bill was first introduced, the community sought what could only be described as a bigger stick to be used against employers who either inadvertently were doing the wrong thing or deliberately were doing the wrong thing. And this iteration of the amnesty achieves what we believe on this side of the chamber to be the perfect balance of what we have described, and in the other place they have described as well as being the carrot and the stick, as a very simple analogy. The carrot in this case is the amnesty itself, along with the suite of other measures that have been already legislated, and the stick is the significant penalties which will be imposed if this is not complied during the amnesty period. So the bill complements the entire integrity package legislated earlier this year, and it provides employers with an opportunity to come clean, to pay their historical debts before the new enforcement arrangements come into effect. And once again, it highlights, as I have said multiple times, that this government is on the side of workers. This is a piece of legislation which is designed to protect the employees. And as they say in life, Madam Acting Deputy President, one gets more with honey than one does with vinegar. That's very important to take into account. So I take the opportunity to commend this bill to the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Antich.